You're listening to the Music Tech Teacher podcast, episode number 25. Welcome to the Music Tech Teacher podcast. Music tech tips, lesson ideas, advice, news, and interviews, especially for music teachers. Brought to you by midnightmusic.com.au. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Music Tech Teacher podcast. I'm your host, Katie Wardrobe from midnightmusic.com.au, the place for music teachers to get the help they need using technology in music education. It's also the home of the Midnight Music community, where you can find music tech online courses, video tutorials, tips and personalised support. For more information about the community and a special offer for podcast listeners, go to midnightmusic.com.au/podcast offer. This episode's guest is Richard McCready, who is using music technology to help teenagers find identity through a range of creative projects. I hope you enjoy my chat with Richard. I had a great time talking to him, and we could have probably talked for another hour or two, but we'll save that up for a future episode. So here's my talk with Richard. Today I'm joined by Richard McCready. Richard was born in Ireland but moved to the US in the early 1990s, where he's been teaching ever since. With a background in music and computer science, he decided to study music performance at college but also ended up taking electronic music courses. When he moved into music teaching, he incorporated technology into his classes, and he currently runs the music tech program at Riverhill High School in Columbia, Maryland. Richard is the author of Making Music with GarageBand and Mixcraft and Make Your Own Music. And he's also the series editor of the Prestissimo series of technology guides for teachers, which is published by Oxford. He was also named the Time Teacher, of the Year in 2013. Richard's still getting over the disappointment of missing out on selection for the school cricket team despite having bowled a hat trick. So welcome, Richard.
Well, thank you so much. It's lovely to hear your voice. Thank you for having me on the broadcast.
You're welcome. And so what happened with the school cricket team? That's craziness.
Well, I bowled a hat trick. I took 2 wickets bowled and 1 was caught behind. And every time I turned around to the umpire to say, how's he? I was looking towards the coach as well, but he wasn't interested. I think he'd already picked the team. I think he decided who his frontline bowlers was, and he didn't need another leg spinner. So I just got left behind. I never got onto the team.
And you never got over it by the sounds, because that was how many years ago now?
I have never got over that. That would be, it's 34 years ago.
All those little things. There's often something, remarkable that happens at high school, I think, that you just never forget. And I always like to try and think of the good things, but obviously that was not a great memory.
It probably wasn't good that I was run out for a duck as well early on in the batting trials.
So there's more to the story. That's it.
Yeah, well, I discovered quickly that the other wicket is far further away than it looks on the television. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I think I find that with watching tennis too. When you're watching tennis and you get that view, it's sort of almost a top-down view, like a drone view of the court. And yeah, when you're sitting there watching live and next to the court, it's a lot further than you think.
My advice is never to attempt to run when you knock the ball straight to mid-on. Bad idea.
Oh. And tell us about the school where you're teaching. So Riverhill High School, how long have you been teaching there now?
I've been there 9 years now.
Excellent.
So we're coming up on a decade. This will be our celebration of a decade. We have T-shirts which we give the kids, which say Riverhill Music Technology, oscillating since 2007.
Oh, I love it.
17 coming up, so it's going to be wonderful. Yeah, it's a beautiful program. I usually have 3 or 4 classes every year of music technology, depending on the numbers, and I have 25 kids in each class.
Excellent.
And so I then complement that with guitar class. I teach advanced guitar as well.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the guitar, because I thought, because of what I see from you on Facebook and Twitter and stuff, there's a lot of guitar related things. So I thought guitar was your primary instrument, but then I read, in preparing for this, I read that you're actually a tuba performer. Like, that was your main instrument. Is that correct?
Tuba was my instrument that I went to college on.
And I had no idea. I feel like I don't know you.
Well, I did a degree in tuba, then I did a master's in tuba, and then I did a master's in voice.
Wow.
And when I had played the guitar as a kid, and I had stopped. I had reached this point where I thought I'm not going to get any better. And so I didn't play again until I got a job teaching middle school 15 years ago. And I went out and I bought another guitar and started to play again and just really grew to love it.
Yeah.
And of course, I got past the point at which I'd had problems before, and I, of course, said, well, I'm never going to let any of my students come up with such a pathetic excuse for stopping to play the guitar.
Oh, I love hearing you say that, because that's often what I find, and you would have had this experience too with technology. For people who are resistant to it, like teachers, there's often a sense of, I'm too old to learn this, something new. And I always say to them, so what would you say to someone else who wants to take up an instrument now at a later stage in their life, like in their adulthood? And of course, as a music teacher, you would never say to someone else, oh, it's too late, like forget it, And so I think the same, you've got to turn that around with technology and say, well, it's just something new to learn, and it can be exciting. It's frustrating, of course, at times, but super exciting. And yeah, that's great. That's really good.
Well, I think the enjoyment is so much more than the executant skill.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you get to the point where you've got enough knowledge to be able to sit in with a band, to be able to go to jam, to be able to play something in church, just to be able to join in. I mean, you probably, I'm going to give away my age here, but I remember being, a kid and playing along with the record and thinking, my gosh, I'm in tune with the band. This is great. I'm actually playing along. And what a beautiful feeling that was.
Yeah.
And we can give that to all musicians.
Yeah, absolutely.
All people, and to say, you go at your own level, and you go at the level which you enjoy doing. And we do that with technology as well. The technology is actually getting more and more user-friendly and easier to use and easier to work out.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's absolutely no reason to be intimidated by music technology, just as there's no reason to be intimidated by an instrument.
And one aspect of technology which is almost, well, it's a benefit, I think, is that you can use technology and not have it out to the open until you're ready. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can create something and you can have your headphones on, whereas with an instrument, people around you are going to hear you fumbling and learning and making mistakes, and that's not a bad thing. But with technology, it's even easier. You don't have to worry so much.
It's the same joy as doing a piece of needlepoint, which you then hang up in your own kitchen.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can create a piece of music at home, and you can have people that come to your home listen to it and say, hey, this is something I did. You don't have to put your stuff up on YouTube or SoundCloud. It can be a very personal, wonderful thing. But so many people now are looking for ways to be creative.
Yes. Yep.
Really, they're searching. I don't know if you have these things in Australia, which we have in America right now, which is these wine and paint evenings.
No, I have not heard of that. What is that?
Yeah, well, people go out to these classes and they have a few glasses of wine and they have paint and they have canvas and they all paint. And they come home with a beautiful canvas and they're taught how to paint this. I mean, it's a little bit color by numbers in that everybody paints the same thing, but they love it. People absolutely love it. And you see all these pictures of people on Facebook holding up their canvas, having gone through these paint evenings, and people love it. We've got places here where people can go and just do pottery. You are, given some clay and taught how to mold it, and then how to glaze it, and then a couple of days later you go back and you get your thing. I mean, it's a great thing for parties and stuff like that. People have parties at the clay store.
That's
and
so
they
cool.
go make things.
Yeah,
People
that's great.
For creative things. Coloring in books are so huge right now.
Massive. Yeah, they've been massive everywhere, haven't they? And I think that's true with the music tech stuff, with composition. I'm often giving kind of not limitations or structure to a project which I'm doing or showing in workshops. And, we talk about using a specific, maybe a scale or a set of chords or something. And it just becomes much easier as a starting point than with a totally blank canvas where you just go, make something. You give people a bit of structure, and it becomes a much easier process to do something creative. And then, of course, they can take it from there and develop it further. So I'm guessing the painting thing would be like that too.
Yeah, and teachers need to create first before they go and teach it. Anybody that's intimidated by teaching music technology needs to take time to create and to
Yeah.
feel joy and
Yeah.
just to get into the program, whether that be GarageBand or Ableton or whatever it is, or if they're doing it in Sibelius or a notation app or something, they just need to take the time to really enjoy that.
Yeah, it's really important to do the project yourself first, and I've always done that myself. And my friend James Humberstone has done a whole
Yes.
keynote talk on that subject. I think basically his mantra throughout that was do the project yourself first, and it becomes really important because you not only get to create something yourself and feel proud of it, but you also find the pitfalls along the way that might trip your students up, and you can warn them ahead of time, and all of those things are good. And it actually makes me think, I remember looking at your website, which we'll link to in the show notes, but you've got a website where your student portfolios are, and it's fantastic because you can see all the projects that you've assigned them over the time, and they've got examples of their work up there and feedback, and I'd like to talk a bit more about that afterwards, but you've got yourself up there too, and you've done the projects and you have your own examples, which I thought was really great.
Yeah, thank you for noticing that. I do make my own portfolio at the same time to show that I am a musician. And the portfolio is an exercise in finding our identity as musicians. And when I talk about finding identity as a musician, I come up with my own stories of where I got to this elevated place in my life. The stuff that I listened to as a teenager, the stuff that I linked to, the stuff that made me appreciate music and appreciate making music. And so at the same time as students are creating their portfolios, I create mine.
Yeah, I really love that. And I loved the fact that you have them, not only do they share the work of the assignments that you've, set for them, they talk about it, which I think is really interesting, their thought process behind, what they did and the choices they made. I laughed because one of the ones I read, he said, I was in a bad mood that day, and so I decided to add some fun into it. And, he added some funny sound effects into this project.
Yeah.
I can't remember which one it was, but I thought that was really funny.
Is that the goat in the
yes,
Chariots?
That's it. Yeah, the goats. Yeah. It was a Chariots of Fire remix, was it? Is that right?
That's right.
From memory, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah,
and he discovered the sampler in Ableton quite by accident. I hadn't told them about that, but he discovered it. And then the next thing is he got some goats and started playing it. And he just sat there and laughed and laughed and laughed. And then he decided, I'm going to record this.
I love it. I love the honesty, It's good.
Yeah, I build my portfolio at the same rate as them.
Oh, good. I was going to ask you that. I wondered if you had done yours ahead of time as examples, or whether you were doing it at the same time. So that's really good.
No,
that's interesting.
What I want to do with the kids is, I'll tell them that everything is a voyage of discovery. And we use, Weebly, which is a fairly simple WYSIWYG editor. But I'll say to them, there's new things which they might have added since I last did a portfolio. There might be things in a different place, so it's ridiculous for me just to tell you where to do things, but I'm going to do it at the same time, so I'm going to learn at the same time. So I'll come in and I'll tell them what stage I'm up to with my process. Maybe I've got my biography done, maybe I've got a page of my influences, maybe I've started a page of putting up my own compositions, and so that they can kind of go along with me at the same rate. I do the same with all projects in school. I will do a project before I teach it, even if I've taught it the same project 3 or 4 times.
Yep, I do the same thing because things change or you forget.
I will go back to the drawing board. I will start it again, and I will do one at home. And then with each of my classes, I will create that project, another project, something new at the same rate as they're doing.
Yeah, right.
So even when they're working, when I set them off to work and I say, you've got half an hour to work on that, I'll sit down at my desk and I'll work at mine. I can do things faster than them, so I can do the task within 10 minutes and then I'm available to go around and help them. But I'm actually sitting down and making sure I'm at that point. And I will have on my desktop a project for period 2, a project for period 4, and a project for period 6. And each of those then I'm building on every class. If period 4 comes in, I open where I'm up to with period 4, and I show the next point, and I work on that so I'm ready for the next day when that comes in. But I don't use the same project for all 3 classes.
Oh, that's so fascinating. Wow, that's great.
It's fun to see that happen, and it refreshes me all the time. And it also shows the kids that the creative process is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just tell us what are the ages of students that you're working with?
My students are anywhere from 15 to 18 years old.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Okay, cool. And tell us about the projects that they're doing. So obviously, I mean, they're setting up the website, the portfolio itself. So you mentioned you use Weebly, which is a free website, that people can just sign up for and use. And they've got some beautiful templates. So you instantly get something that looks really nice and it's not hard to use. And it's they've made some changes recently and they're more mobile friendly and, all of those other things. So I think it's a really great option for digital portfolios for students because it teaches them that publishing out to the world thing. If you're working with students that are old enough to do that and to share their work online, and it's such a great thing to have it out in the public. It gives it a bit more meaning, I think, or weight or gravity.
So what I want is for them to show with their portfolio who they are. Mm-hmm. That they are discovering through music their identity as a teenager. Every teenager wants to discover their identity. At the age of 11, all us teenagers are listening to exactly the same band. I'm sure you in your school were listening to this exactly the same band as all your girlfriends and boyfriends at the age of 11. And at the age of 15, 16, you start to discover your own way. And you start to really identify with a certain population. And you might see that through a certain artist that identifies there. And so with their portfolio, what they're doing is they're building a picture of who they are. And with each composition, the compositions are influenced by they are as a musician. They're kind of finding their own lane. They're driving their own car, and look, this is your lane, this is somebody else's lane, this is Teddy's lane, this is Josie's lane, but this is your lane. And you're putting yourself there. So that even though people are working on a similar project, it identifies with who they are because their influences are coming into that. And when they write about their project, what I want them to talk about is the process they went through and what they learned. That they should be able to show that they are capable of understanding their own learning, which I think is the most important piece of that portfolio. So that when they are able to then send that into a college for possible entrance, not only for a music program, but for any program, to show that they are creative, if they understand the metacognitive piece of how they actually learn and what they do, how that feeds their learning, I think that's going to be very attractive to a university.
Yeah, absolutely. And it like you said, it goes beyond just music as a topic or a subject, and those skills can be applied across the board really with anything.
Yeah. I send 4 students out a year possibly to do music technology as in a 4-year institution. Yet I teach 100 to 125 every year. And I'm not foolish like a band teacher who worries about why a trumpet kid is not going to play the trumpet after high school. That's not where my focus is. My focus is that I'm creating a creative person, and I'm creating a musician that will be able to make music all their life.
Yeah. And get the enjoyment from it and share stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So any of the projects which we do, we actually start by them finding their own identity. I throw them into GarageBand early on, and I said, if you like heavy metal, find me as many heavy metal loops as you can. Find me as many cool drum loops as you can. And then I show them how to change those so that they get more into the sounds that they like. I got a lot of kids, of course, who are into trap, so I'll show them how to take a drum beat and make it into trap. We can take something country and we can turn it into a trap beat, and they love this. And they love the idea of being able to take things and put them into their own style. And that gets us into exploring, how to create beats, how to use effects, and how to mix. And gradually, as they go through their first year with me, they will do sorts of projects where they're creating podcasts of their favorite artists. They narrate a children's book, and they compose their own music for it and add sound effects, and they add voices, which allows them to experiment, of course, with changing pitches and adding filters and all those sorts of things.
I love that as a project. I've done that a bit too, and it's such a great accessible thing to do. It's a really good, easy way to get into editing of audio and, experimenting with those effects and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I do some things which are straight composition, where we take... we'll pull a composition down into 4 component parts, which are beat, bass line, chords, and melody. And we'll find out how to put melodies with beats and how to put chords with things and how to put those four things together. I don't teach that there is an order to them. I teach that we need all four components and we've got to throw them in the mixing bowl somehow, and we get from one to the other.
That's interesting because, I've had a discussion before with a couple of people about which of those things do you do first. And, for me, it really varies. Sometimes you just start with the drum pattern for some reason and then add other things. And then other times it might be a chord sequence or maybe a melody, and it really makes no difference. But I think some people have a consistent approach, don't they? They tend to always start with melody or always chords.
I've always found it changes from artist to artist.
Yeah.
What I did, at first I thought, what is the order? I from being a studio musician, I thought, okay, I always record drums first.
Yeah, me too. With that sort of thing, I do too.
And so I started doing composition that way. And then I thought, well, wait a second, does everybody necessarily do that?
Yeah.
And then I thought, probably not. And I thought, what does Paul McCartney do? Paul McCartney thinks harmonically first.
Yeah.
And melodically. And what does Dylan do? Well, Dylan thinks lyrically first.
Oh, I know. And that's such a big thing, isn't it? I may have mentioned on another episode, I have this thing where me and my own kids, we listen to songs. We take turns in choosing songs on our car trips each time. So there's three of us, my two boys and me, and we rotate, each of us having a choice. And my eldest particularly is very much into hip hop and rap at the moment. And his thing that he notices the most are the lyrics, and I said I made the mistake of saying him to the other day, that we were listening to an Eminem song, and I said, man, this is just really repetitive. And he looked at me, he's like, how can you say that? And then I realized we were talking about two different things. I was listening to the bass line, which had one single note for 3 minutes, and he was listening to the lyrics, and he's like, there's hardly any repetition, Mum. How can you say that?
Well, the point of entry is different from every single musician. And that's what I see, that when we look at a piece of music, we can't teach somebody else to say, well, my method is what works for you. Mm. I saw Paul Simon a few weeks ago.
Oh,
and he actually,
really?
Yeah.
How did you manage that? Wow, at a concert?
Yeah, he was playing locally here, and I got tickets for my wife and myself. And
seriously,
it was amazing. But he spoke at one point about how when he was younger, he would always start by just trying to find a riff on a guitar.
Yeah.
And the song came from an initial riff, and he'd sit there for hours just trying to find that golden moment. And then when he went off to South Africa, everything starts with finding rhythm first.
Oh, right.
And his approach to writing has changed. That doesn't mean that he can't sit down and just honk out a riff and create a song around that. But he's able to alter his songwriting method and his compositional method according to his age, where he is, his place in his life, and what he wants to do. And so, instead of, taking this back to my classroom, instead of compositions being prescriptive about, today we're going to write a drum beat, tomorrow we're going to write a bass line, the next day we're going to write chords, it's more or less that we have experimentation about how those things all work. And then when the compositional element starts, you say, okay, now we're going to try to put these things together. It's kind of like, doing your own sous chefing before you cook.
Yeah.
All your stuff so it's out there. And then you've prepared everything, you've marinated everything, you've chopped everything, you've done what you need to. And then the final cooking process is just putting that all together.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Do you have students save elements into, say, the loop library of whichever program they're using? Like, Ableton Live's kind of set up like, you can set up small sketches or loops or little snippets of music, and it makes that approach really easy. Right, in GarageBand and Logic, you would drag stuff into your loop library and do it that way, and then use them back into your composition.
Right, except that particular functionality is blocked by our computing and network services.
No, seriously? In which one? In Logic GarageBand or?
In GarageBand.
Oh, no. That's one of the things I love about GarageBand. So not all of the programs allow you to save stuff into their library, and I think that's a great approach, setting up small snippets of ideas and then borrowing them back,
But because it's part of the shared library, if they try to add anything, if we try to import loops or anything, we got, you need an administrator's name and password.
Oh, no.
But Ableton makes it so much easier. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
So you can do that with when your students are using Ableton. Yeah.
Ableton's a pirate's dream. Ableton allows us to do so much. And we can actually, don't call the network police, but we've managed to find a lot of workarounds with Pro Tools as well, so they don't know where we're installing plugins.
And so I'm going to guess that you let students use whichever tool they use. Is that right? Software program wise. I mean, do they get to choose, or do you sort of direct them towards Ableton Live, for instance, for some things, or do they have the freedom to do whatever?
I get them started with GarageBand so that they can start to understand signal flow. Mm-hmm. I want them to understand basic mixing. I want them to understand volume levels, panning. I want them to understand EQ and compression. Mm-hmm. Those things I get in, and I want them to understand the concept of tracks. I want them to understand the concept of a digital audio workstation, muting and soloing. All those things I can get in GarageBand. And then I will move on to Ableton Live, and we can get much more... we can get more advanced compositionally with it. And then with my advanced class, I'll then bring them into Pro Tools. And they will get to the stage where they will select a particular project, and they will decide themselves what digital audio workstation to use. I have a number of them that have Logic at home. Logic seems to be very popular with our kids at home, and some that have FL Studio. And some that have, Cubase and those sorts of things. I also point them towards online digital audio workstations. I teach them, I said, what, you may learn to drive in a Chevy, but if I give you a Mini, you're going to be able to drive it.
Yeah.
And I said, you should be, I give them one project where I just say, www.soundtrap.com, go for it.
Yeah.
You are not allowed to ask me how it works. You are not allowed to look up any videos. You're not allowed to Google anything. And they just get into it. And a day later, they got a composition all done in Soundtrap. They work it out themselves because once you learn to drive one, you learn to drive them all.
I agree. I say that all the time. Some teachers come to me and they're stressed or worried because their school's about to switch over, say from PCs to Macs or vice versa, or they're going to online software only. And I always say, have you been using something in the past? Like, have you used GarageBand if you've had Macs in the past? And I said, well, it's okay because all of them work really in the same way. I mean, give or take features and stuff, but they really work the same way. And once you know the terminology, particularly if you kind of generalize the terminology or know variations on terms for things like the playhead is sometimes called the cursor and so on, or the playback line if you're a bit more notation wise, and if you know that, then you can look for all of those terms, any of those terms. If you know what panning is, or that it's going to be under automation, then you know that you're just going to look up automation somewhere and it's probably on the track header. So
Absolutely.
I agree. It's a case of learning everything, and it's the same as switching from Microsoft Word to Pages to Google Docs. Right. It's all the same,
It is all the same, and my students will choose the appropriate tool for what they want to do.
Yeah, I like that because that's a real world, situation. Once they've left school, really, they're going to just use whatever they have. So that's a great approach.
I have several projects which end up, going through 2 digital audio workstations before they're done.
Yeah, right.
They will use one for tracking. They'll use a different one for mixing.
Oh, that's so interesting.
They're quite sensible about recognizing what strengths certain digital audio workstations have and the comfort they have with certain digital audio workstations.
Yeah. I often combine things too. Audacity I love, for instance, for its precision of editing a waveform. And it's so much easier, I find, to do that than in GarageBand, as an example. And so I will do stuff in Audacity and then I will move it across to GarageBand or some other, software and do further work on it there. But yeah, I agree. It's about using the right tool for the job. And so it's like your kitchen analogy of switching knives for different jobs or saucepans or something.
Also, you don't drive your Mini in the mountains,
Yeah.
Certainly not if it's an automatic.
Can you describe some of the projects that you do with the students? You mentioned, say, the narrating a children's book and the stuff you do with that, but what are some of the other things that you've been doing?
I choose my projects according to my class and what I see that they want to do. but there's things like we will do. We'll take a scene from a movie, and we'll recreate a new piece of music. One of my favorites is to take The Day the Earth Stood Still and to research about the theremin and to research about early analog synthesis, and then only allow them analog synthesis with lots of glides and stuff to create a new soundtrack for something.
Excellent.
I like, there's one I did this year, which I really liked, called Colors, where I went back to an album by Ken Nordine, which is a 60s beat album of word poetry, in which he just takes a color and talks about the quality of that color. And then he has a little jazz quartet in the background that makes this abstract music that goes with it. So we choose our own colors, and then we create a poem around what that color means, and we create music to go with the effect of that color.
Oh, that's great. That appeals to me a lot because I'm a little bit obsessed with color.
My kids really dig it, and one of my students this year, he went to the paint store and got one of those huge color wheels.
Oh, yes. Oh, awesome.
It was awesome. And all the kids were just checking it every day to find out what cool colors they could use.
One of my favourite things in the paint shop is, the place where you can get all those strips of colour samples. And I just love looking at them, but they always look a bit wrong under the light of the store. The store light is never very good. And so you've got to kind of take them outside to check them properly.
Of course.
Oh, I love that. That sounds fabulous. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I have one where they create an imaginary video game, and they have to create the music for the video game. And that video game then has to go through different levels or worlds or time zones or atmospheres. And so they have to present variation to the music, and then they have to create a PowerPoint or a keynote in which they have to sell that video game to a company.
Wow,
and
that's involved.
They must describe the entire video game, their concept for the video game, and to go with that must be the music that we hear, because that's going to give the people you're selling to the atmosphere of your game.
Excellent. So the PowerPoint is showing just still images, obviously, of what they're imagining the game to be. It's not actually showing footage as such.
No, it's not, though I have had a couple that have created their own footage through animation, which has been wonderful.
Awesome. Of course they have. I love that.
Side, they will create, some actual scenes from a video game. Yeah. I don't know if you've noticed, but something odd about our current generation is that they watch other people play video games on YouTube. I
know. My kids are obsessed with it. But I think that's true of everything, not just video games. They like watching other people do almost anything. It's really bizarre. And did you see, we recently had on our Australian 60 Minutes program, we had an article about professional gamers, essentially. And they showed the first scene of this news article was a big stadium, massive stadium, like sports stadium, with all these people watching huge, enormous screens. And it was of the pro gamers playing whatever game it was. And it was like a massive sports match. It was insane. It was just crazy.
Well, we begin to show our age, don't we?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. My kids are like, and so it's just so mind-blowing.
I love to take existent music and allow kids to remix.
Yeah, I do too. I struggle only from the fact that I really try very hard to be squeaky clean with all of that, and it's a harder thing just, not being free to take anything at any time. And I have really mixed feelings about it because, I like to teach being, responsible with, use of digital materials of other people's and using stuff which you have been given permission up front, like Creative Commons licensed or public domain. And there's quite a bit of stuff you can find, but there's some areas which are harder to find what you want to use. And I mean, you and I and Barb Friedman, who's, been on the show before, we share remix stems. Here's our little thing, once one of us finds a set of remix stems, we basically share it with each other in a Dropbox folder. And it's so useful because those are really hard to come across. I mean, you can find them occasionally, and I like finding the ones that have come up for a competition, remix competition. So they've been legally made available, and then I feel quite fine about using them in workshops workshops or sharing them with other people, but I'm not so keen on sharing ones that have just been passed around on the internet. There's sort of mysterious underworld of remix sharing, remix stem sharing out there. And, you can find some great stuff, but I'm always like, oh, where's that come from though? I don't know.
It is a little dubious, but what I've learned to do is to actually use the word remix for even more than we might presume it means in the music tech world. For example, you mentioned Chariots of Fire remix.
Yes.
What that project was, the kids actually learned to play Chariots of Fire. So I gave them the notation for it.
Yeah.
And we watched the movie. We talked about Vangelis and his improvisation and stuff like that. And I said, what you need to do is record Chariots of Fire. And so they actually learned to play it. And then, they created their own beats and they created their own bass line and put the chords in and all those things. And they called it a remix.
Yeah, and it's more of a cover, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And we can use that word remix for everything. I mean, I really started to learn from the kids.
Yeah.
And, the years ago, they would come in and say, yo, is this where I get to make beats?
Yeah.
And I would be offended. I would be, that's a real oversimplification of what I do. And then after a while, I realized that just meant to them, is this where we get to make music?
Yeah, that's right. That's their terminology, yeah.
This is where we get to make beats. And now they come in and say, is this where we get to drop a mixtape? I'm like, you bet.
which is from our childhood, our terminology.
I don't know what a tape is, but they still say I'm going to drop a mixtape, and that means they're going to create music.
So what are they referring to when they say that sentence to you? That they want to make? Are they talking about a collection of songs, or what are they talking about there?
They're saying, I want to make music.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's just that the fun term, I mean, it was, up until recently, the good term for music was a beat.
Yeah.
I created it. Well, I mean, when I was at college, and probably you were at college, if somebody said, I've written a song and there was no vocals in it, we were like, it's not a song.
Yeah, no, I have that argument with a couple of people.
We've had to mellow to that. And
totally.
Say, oh yeah, I like your song.
Yeah.
And now I got to the point where we've met a kid that, will bring me a composition. He's saying, would you listen to my beat?
Yeah.
And I'll listen to the thing and I evaluate it as a composition. Yeah. Now if a kid says, I've done a mixtape, he means I've written a piece of music.
Hilarious. I have not heard that. Wow, I'm not hanging around with the right people. Wow, that's so funny. And I've also let things go as well. In the remix STEM world, I kind of used to laugh about the fact that an unaccompanied vocal stem, i.e. just the vocals on their own without anything in the background, is called an a cappella, or a PEL for short. So in some websites, you go to the menu, which is called PELs, and that means that you're going to the place where there are vocal tracks without any accompaniment with them.
I was up in Minnesota last week, and somebody asked one of the kids, do you have bars? What? And I thought he said, do you have bars? And I thought he was asking about the nightlife in Clarksville. Apparently now the term bars means
tabs?
A repertoire of quality compositions.
What?
If you've got bars, bars is your set of compositions that you can pull from, that you've got.
I have never heard that. Wow, I would not have even guessed that one.
Yeah, you've got bars means you've got an EP of good songs.
Wow.
I know, it's amazing.
That's hilarious. And I actually laugh still about the fact that, like, the terminology of EP is still used. You go to Spotify and someone's released an EP and it's like, there's no, physical vinyl record which just has 5 tracks on it. It just happens to be a small collection of digital music which is being released as a thing, Yeah, it's really funny, isn't it? Yeah, and the Beats one, it took me a while to realise that beats encompassed a lot of things, and beats for me in the past, I would have thought years ago that was just rhythmic stuff like you were saying, but really it's, it might be a riff. It's actually a riff or a little keyboard figure that has a backing of, some drums with it, and that's the beat. And you've just got to really recategorize things in your mind as a music teacher, I think, because that's what the students, you can't be correcting them and saying, they're being incorrect, because that's just futile. I think you got to kind of go with it.
Yeah, you don't.
That's fascinating. Okay, I've learnt 2 new things today, at least. Bars, and what was the other one? Can't
Well,
remember
you
now.
talked about this, but yeah, oh, mixtape.
Mixtape. Yeah, the mixtape term. No, I've never heard that being used in that way. Wow, that's great. That's really cool. This episode of the Music Tech Teacher podcast is brought to you by the Midnight Music Community. The Midnight Music Community is an online space for music teachers who'd like help using technology in their music lessons. There are online courses, video tutorials, lesson plans, music tech news, and professional development certificates are provided for any training that you undertake. I'm inside the community every day, personally answering members' questions and sharing tips and ideas. The best thing is that you get to connect with hundreds of other music teachers just like you and share your own experiences and occasional music tech frustrations. For more information and a special joining price just for the listeners of this podcast, visit midnightmusic.com.au/podcast offer. That's midnightmusic.com.au/podcast offer. What is the favourite project of your students, would you say? As a group, do they have a favourite that they all love, or is it varied depending on their taste and style?
Well, it can certainly vary. When I take evaluations in at the end of the year, it certainly seems that they really love one I do, which is the Lego breakdance video.
Oh, really? Tell me about that.
It's a stop frame animation of some Legos, and they are at a breakdance tournament.
Yeah, cool. I think I've seen that actually, and I think it might even be available on the Internet Archive website.
It's archive.org.
Yeah, archive.org. Excellent. Okay, I'll put a link to that.
I rip out the original audio.
Yep.
We actually listen to it first and we discover what's wrong with it. You know, it's distorted. The music is anachronistic because it doesn't belong. There's no way people would break dance to a Gary Glitter tune. It's all wrong, and it also doesn't tell the story. There's quite clearly a story because these people are at a park jam, and you see different figures come out, and you see one which is a set of like stormtroopers from or paratroopers, I don't know what it is, from Star Wars, stormtroopers. And then eventually there is a police car that comes across and drives straight through the middle of the jam and knocks one of the guys over. The actual original soundtrack doesn't tell the story at all. But when you allow the kids to tell the story and to see that there are different characters and different styles and say, you know, part of animation, half of animation is sound because you're bringing something to life. And the video on its own will not do it. So they have to go to the next level and then bring that to life, including sound effects for all the crowd cheering and the applause between each breakdancer and the police car at the end, or some of them do it as an ice cream van because that's a bit more fun. And of course, things are moving around the stage, so you have to use panning all the time. You have to use volume to bring things front and back. And all the time they say that this is the first time I really got to make my own music, because they were creating their own drum beats and adding things to it and in sections, so that there's quite a lot of individual sections which they're making, even within a 2.5-minute video. And so they really think that this is the first time they have complete carte blanche to do what they want.
Yeah, that's great.
When in actual fact, the guidelines are quite strict, because if they don't tell that story, then they're not going to succeed.
Yeah.
But they love to be able to tell that story. I know that, as humans, we love to tell stories. And one of the reasons we write so many songs is because we're telling stories. Why hip-hop is so important is because we're telling stories. Why bluegrass is so important, folk, rock and roll, all of these are telling stories. And for them, they're able to tell that story through music in their own way.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
It's huge to them. That's another reason they also like the children's book, to narrate a children's book, because they can choose a story from their own childhood. If they want to ask their mom to find a book up in the attic and bring it in, they can do that. And then some of them will actually do the story, and then they will make a CD and they will send it to a cousin or a younger brother or something like that. I always try to do that one in December so they have it for the
Christmas. Holidays and stuff. Yeah, great project. Really great project.
They also love the video game project because they get to tell a story with the game. And ultimately, a lot of video games, which they are using, are stories. And when we look at examples of them, we look at things like Mario. Of course, you can't get away from Mario in the world of video games. And we talk about that story that's there and how much that is just always a retelling of the story of finding the princess and tackling Bowser and those things. We always look at Sonic and we say, what is the story there? We look at Final Fantasy, which is one of the great ones in terms of creating music. Nobuo Uematsu did extraordinary work with Final Fantasy. And again, all the time it's telling a story. So, I think a lot of them want to be able to tell their story. Humans want to tell stories. And if we can introduce to them that they can do that through music, they really link into that and they love to do that.
And I think it makes me just think back to their portfolios that you get them to do on, the Weebly website. I really love the fact that you've asked them to list their musical influences, and there's a special page for that. And they have a collection of, musicians or artists or albums, whatever it is that have influenced them. And I was really interested to read some of them because, yes, there are maybe a couple of recent examples, recent artists or, albums, but lots of them have things from, decades ago in their list of influences, which I found really interesting, a big variety of styles of music and artists as well.
Yeah. And another thing we do, which they really link into, is where we will take the music that they know and we will research a similar music in a different part of the world. What is the focus and reason for the music that you're listening to? And now let's find that somewhere else, which is outside of your vicinity. So one could say, all right, you're into hip hop and you live in Melbourne. Okay, so we're going to talk about the hip hop scene in Melbourne and find out things that are going on. Then, on a bigger scale, how does that apply throughout Australia and New Zealand, maybe? Let's find where hip-hop is going around the country. And what does that mean for the identity of the Australian? Is there examples, for example, of Aboriginal hip-hop? What does that mean? And what is going on there? Is there examples of Maori hip-hop? What does that story mean? And then say, well, what does hip-hop mean in the global sphere? Let's look over at America. Let's see what hip-hop is doing there. And let's see also what hip-hop is doing in Africa. Let's see what hip-hop is doing in the subcontinent of India. And find that ultimately hip-hop has many musical things in common, but also has societal things in common. Find people using music in similar ways outside of your city block. That's an advanced topic. I don't get that into that with my first-year kids, but with my second, third, fourth-year kids, that really opens their world, and they start listening to music which is similar, but then could have completely different influenced beats or completely different language or different modalities, and it takes them in a new direction, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's great. That's really good. I think it's great to relate it to a wider vicinity than just your immediate experience and to get a bit more broad,
Yeah, I mean, my kids could get completely stuck in thinking just of music within the Eastern United States.
Yeah, exactly.
Really not a healthy worldview to think that you're the only people that are doing a certain type of music or the only people that have these problems or this desire to communicate.
Yeah.
By the way, since people are listening, if they want to check out the website, riverhillmusictech.com, I'm sure you're going to put that with the details with the podcast, but if anybody's listening and wants to click on that.
Yeah, I definitely will, because you can get a great sense of what the project is that the kids have been set, and like we've been talking about, their feedback about the project from their own point of view, and it's got examples of what they've come up with. So it's just a great insight into how they interpreted the assignment and what they ended up doing. And tell us... Go on.
There's a few times a year as well when I will go out to what we call artist-teacher institutes, where we have teachers who are in-service teachers, so they're experienced teachers, but they're learning about arts integration. And I will show up with a handful of my kids. In fact, I'm taking 3 of them out on Wednesday. And we show up, we make some music, and then they talk about being a creative artist. And they always refer back to their portfolios, and they always show their portfolios how creativity has altered them. And I usually take a mix of current students and former students. So on Wednesday, I'm taking one guitarist who's in his last year with me, and then I'm taking a young lady who graduated from me 3 years ago but is studying guitar and music technology at college, and then another young man who is studying engineering, I believe, but took music with me, and it's extraordinary. And they're all extraordinary, and they are able to speak very, very eloquently and very confidently about why creative education is important. I have to sit on my hands, which is a bit of a problem because I love it. And if someone puts me in front of a group of people and says, talk about creative education, well, I'll be there till Jesus comes back. Jesus will be pushing me off the stage saying, I've got business to do. But the kids will go on forever and talk about their creativity. And so it's great that music technology and this composition has enabled them to discover that and to be able to free that up.
I think it really opens it up to kids that may not have found that side of their own creativity before. Technology is so accessible to anyone, and, even with just a phone or just an iPad, you can do so much nowadays. I mean, it's really great what you've got open to you. Even if you haven't got an instrument or haven't learnt an instrument in the past, there's still a lot you can do, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
And so just to finish off, tell us about the books that you've written. I want to make sure that we don't forget to mention those. And I've got your Making Music with GarageBand and Mixcraft, which you co-authored. And which side did you did the GarageBand ones? Is that correct? You did the Mixcraft. I knew I'd get it wrong. And so that book, for the people who haven't seen that book, it's basically a collection of projects that you can do in either GarageBand and Mixcraft, and there's kind of like alternating chapters on each one, and you can basically adapt everything in the book for each of the other software programs or any other software program you're using for that matter.
Yeah. The idea there was Jim Frankel came up with the idea of having a suite of creative lessons. And initially we said, well, we'll write the same exact lessons in Mixcraft and GarageBand.
I wondered about this, yes. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And then as Michael and I did all the lessons in there, as we sat and talked about it, we realized that each of the things that we do is quite easily translatable into the other without us having to spell it out. So it would make more sense to write to the real idiosyncratic strengths of each of the softwares. And then, somebody could go through the book and they could find ideas from there and then apply it. So if somebody has GarageBand, they may look at my lesson on celebrating local music, how to write a podcast about local musicians and music that's going on in your school, and quite easily apply that to the opposite program. So Robin recorded a series of videos which show the skills in GarageBand and Mixcraft and enable you to do those together. So it's been a well-received book, and it was a great project to work on. Mike and Robin and Jim are, of course, extraordinary educators, and they inspire me, and it's wonderful to work with those people.
Yeah, and the more recent one is the Make Your Own Music one. Was that last year that it came out?
It just came out last year, yeah. PreSonus had a product you could buy called the Music Creation Suite, where in the box you got a keyboard and an audio interface and a pair of headphones, cables that you needed, plus Studio One software and Notion software. So that you had the notation part and you had the digital audio workstation part. So I decided to write a book so that one could teach music technology with a series of projects and a series of skills that use both notation and digital audio workstation and allow you to develop both of those skills.
Yeah, fabulous.
So I wrote it as a series of 2 skills per chapter plus a bonus skill, which goes through 8 chapters, getting you up and running with sequencing, getting you up and running with recording, getting you up and running with the virtual instruments, getting you up and running with notation, and moving between the two, of course. And series of videos that went with that. And I also recorded, introduced into the STEAM ideas for every single chapter.
Oh, that's really interesting. I haven't read this one yet, so I need to get it clearly. But the STEAM thing is very big at the moment, and that's an area that I'm getting into a lot more now.
So there's a section in each chapter where we go into STEAM problem solving.
Excellent.
And we look at one of the problems that existed in the world of music and how notable people came along and solved that problem. And we look at Les Paul, we look at Tom Dowd, we look at David Edward Hughes, who invented the microphone. We look at these sorts of people, and we look at notable moments in the industry, the development of multi-tracking, all those sorts of things, and the development of music publishing. And so we see a problem solving that has been done through music, which really links into, I hope, a lot of cross-curricular ideas for those that choose to adopt the book. And you can't get the music creation suite anymore, but the first chapter does basically say what you need. Get a keyboard. The creation suite was amazing because it was one-stop shopping.
Yeah, that's right. And like we were saying before, I mean, the ideas in that book anyway could be applied to, whichever tools that you've got handy, and, right. Those software programs obviously are going to work really well.
I honestly think Studio One is one of the best out there, and it gets better and better.
Yeah, absolutely. We're so spoilt for choice these days, aren't we, with everything, DAWs and notation. It's crazy. There's just so much to choose from now.
Right, and Notion is a fabulous notation program.
Yeah,
It's cheaper than Sibelius or Finale, and it's incredibly robust and expandable. And it's very easy to use. So I've enjoyed using both of them. And then with Oxford, we're working on a series of books for music technology, for easy guides for teachers. The first one was on digital organization. How to organize your digital library, how to organize all your sheet music, how to organize your calendar, how to organize everything in your band room or your choir room or your classroom, whatever, so that it's all at your fingertips with your iPad or your iPhone or your computer. The second one was on recording. We find a lot of teachers that don't know anything about recording their ensemble. And they have to hire outside help to record a concert. Or they put one microphone up in front of their band and then wonder why it sounds awful.
Yeah, yeah. You get a lot of one instrument and not much of anyone else.
Exactly. And so the Recording Tips for Music Educators by Ron Kearns is very valuable, very easy, quick guide to really correct all the problems, including going into things like, what to do if you're outside and the wind just won't stop blowing, or they put you in the gymnasium instead of the auditorium, all those things. And then we're currently working on practice room tips. So the sort of smart music apps that are around. I don't know if in Australia you've still got In the Chair. I know that was around for a while. But those sort of packages which allow you to work on your practice, your individual practice, and of course for a teacher to assign that work and to monitor it and all the wonderful things that you can do with that to track students' progress. Then we have another one that is hopefully going to get started soon about smart boards and smart projectors and the sorts of things that one can do with interactive websites on a big screen.
Excellent. Sounds great. I'm going to check this out. I haven't looked at these yet, but they sound really practical. That's, often my approach is just, it's the practicalities that people need to know about. And like you said, all that organisation stuff, people don't talk about that so much. And it's a word of mouth thing a lot of the time.
Yeah. Got 2 books published so far and hoping to get some more, coming off the presses as we can get them done. But we're usually editing one at the same time as we're soliciting another one, at the same time as we're proofing another one. It's
a hard road.
Yeah, we're going to try to get to 10 volumes in all, but I think we're right now. We've got 2 out and we're working on number 5, something like that.
Excellent. All right. Well, I will link to all of those three things that we've mentioned in the show notes as well. So I better not keep you any longer. We've been chatting so long, but it's just been so interesting. I feel like we could go for about 3 hours, and maybe we'll need to do a follow-up. I think that would be the best thing.
Anytime. It's always fun to music technology.
At some point, I'm going to attempt to do a round table sort of discussion with a few of us. It may be complete disaster, but it could be great. So I'm happy to live on the edge and give it a go. We can all connect via Zoom or something like that, one of those conferencing systems. But I think that would be a really great thing to do and have a roundtable discussion about some topic or another, and it could become a regular thing. Lots of fun.
Or it could come to blows.
It could come to blows. Although I think most of us tend to agree about a lot of things.
We do.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, we only joke about it coming to blows and stuff like that.
We do.
The thing is, with the community that I know of people that are in time and those people that go to conferences and all of those of us that are taking a big step towards advancing music technology, the amazing thing is that we've all come up with the same ideas completely individually.
I know. I mentioned that in a previous episode. Yeah, I had a series of projects that I was doing, and then I read, I think it maybe first was Scott Watson's book, and then I read Barb Friedman's book, and I'm like, man, we're all doing the same things. And then yours as well, the Making Music with GarageBand and Mixcraft, a lot of those were similar too. And I'm thinking, how did we do this? It's like ESP or something. We're all kind of doing it in our own areas, but they're all, I think it's because they're great projects. They're just interesting, practical projects, which are, the creative things and the things that kids love to do. So you're right. Absolutely.
Yeah. And we're all incredibly passionate about what we do because we love seeing the results of it. We love seeing how this music education inspires our young people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just great. It's so much fun, and you're just going to kind of got to take that leap of faith and give things a go, and you really reap the rewards in the end.
Absolutely. Yeah, I will certainly never regret the day I began doing this. It's just wonderful, wonderful stuff.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thank you so much, Richard. We will speak very soon, and I'll look forward to our next chat.
Well, if you've got any cricket teams over there that could use a really good leg spinner.
I'm sure they'd. I think there's a bit of controversy about the whole cricket world at the moment, isn't there? Oh, I don't know. I shouldn't even bring it up. I'm not good about talking about these things. I don't know enough about them.
Tell them this Irish demon over in America that would be willing to turn his arm over a few times, in the cause.
Sounds good. Sounds good. All right. Thanks so much. Speak soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
The Music Tech Teacher podcast is hosted by me, Katie Wardrobe. You can find more information and links from today's episode at midnightmusic.com.au/25. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.